whenever somebody has a problem and they crave normalcy, the reason is because they've sampled that normalcy. You can't crave something you haven't sampled. So if somebody's depressed and they crave happiness, and they say, I want to be happy. You know why? Because they've been happy. You can't crave happiness if you've never been happy. You can't crave sobriety if you've never been sober. The truth is, the world has sampled already this messianic era. Okay, friends, the story begins. We are going to explore a fascinating section of the Talmud, Tractate Sanhedrin, 98a towards the bottom. This is a section in Tractate Sanhedrin which discusses the coming of Moshiach. A big portion of Tractate Sanhedrin is dedicated toward discussing the whole concept of Moshiach. When is Moshiach going to come? What does it take to bring Moshiach? What does it take to bring the Messiah? What is the Messiah? So the Talmud tells us a story. Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi found Elijah the prophet, Eliyahu Hanavi, who was standing at the entrance of the burial cave of Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai. Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai is buried in Meron, right? Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi says to him, to Eliyahu, to Elijah, will I be privileged to come to the world to come? Will I be privileged to be welcomed into paradise? By the way, just side thing, I think this is important. When we say world to come, there's a debate what that actually means. Is that referring to paradise? Is that referring to the Messianic era? What is that exactly talking about? That's a later debate among the commentaries. But what does Elijah respond to him? He says to him, if this master, meaning God, the Holy One, blessed be he, will wish it so. If God wants it, then you will. Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi says, two I saw, Eliyahu and myself. And the voice of three I heard, as the divine presence was also there. And it was in reference to him that Elijah said, if his master will wish it so. They felt the presence of God there. Okay, the story continues. Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi says to Eliyahu Hanavi, to Elijah, when will the Messiah come? When will Mashiach come? Elijah says to him, go and ask him. Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi asked, where is he sitting? Where can I find him? Elijah said to him, at the entrance of the city of Rome. Now, many commentaries take this to not be literal, but to have some sort of spiritual representation, because Mashiach has not yet arrived. He obviously isn't in Rome, right? So, but it means some sort of spiritual realm, at least according to some commentaries. Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi asked him, and what is his identifying signs by means of which I can recognize him? How am I going to know who Mashiach is? What's he wearing? How's he dressed? Eliyahu answers, he sits among the poor who suffer from illnesses, and all of them untie their bandages and tie them all at once. But the Messiah unties one bandage and ties one at a time. He says, perhaps I'll be needed to serve to bring out the redemption, right? What if I'm called to come and I'm in the middle of dealing with bandages? Therefore, I'll never untie or tie more than one bandage, so I'll not be delayed. Mashiach is like ready. So he says, how do I identify Mashiach? He's going to be that guy dealing with the bandages, but he's doing it in a way that's more efficient, in a way that he can pause any moment and actually be ready to come when called upon. Okay, so now the story continues. Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi went to the Messiah. And he says to the Messiah, greetings to you, my rabbi, my teacher, right? In Hebrew, it's Shalom Alecha Rebbe Umayri. The Messiah says to him, greetings to you, Bar Levi, son of Levi. Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi says to him, when will the master come? He's been waiting for this moment to finally ask Mashiach, when are you coming? The Mashiach says to him, the Messiah says to him, today. Sometime later, Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi comes to Elijah. Elijah said to him, what did the Messiah say to you? When is he going to come? He said to Elijah that the Messiah said, greetings, shalom to you by Levi. Elijah said to him, he thereby guaranteed you that your father will enter the world to come as he greeted you with shalom. Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi said to Elijah, the Messiah lied to me as he said to me, I'm coming today. And he didn't come. I asked him, when is he going to come? He says, today. He ain't here. Elijah says to him that this is what he actually said to you. This is what he meant. He said that he will come, quote, today, but he was quoting a verse in the book of Psalms, and he has to finish the verse. Today, if you'll listen to his voice, to the voice of God. Mashiach will come. When? Today. Hayom. Hayom imkoid tishma'u. Today, if you listen to his voice. Okay, so this is the story. Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi wants to know if he's going to enter the world to come. Eliyahu Hanavi says, and that's up to God. He says, when's Mashiach going to come? Go ask him. He goes, he asks him. Mashiach says today. Eliyahu Hanavi says, well, why isn't he here? And Eliyahu clarifies today if you listen to his voice. In other words, implying that the Jewish people got to be better listeners in order to bring Mashiach. Okay, we're left with a number of questions here, a number of ambiguities here. One thing which is not today's topic, not what I wanted to get into today, but I think it's just interesting to mention. The sign of Mashiach is him being with a bunch of poor and wounded people. That's the sign of Mashiach. It reminds me of one of the things the Rebbe had taught in Hayom Yom, that one of the greatnesses, the great attributes of Mashiach is that he's going to be the great of the great. He's going to be a teacher to even Moses and to even the patriarchs. Yet he's going to be able to be relevant and relatable to us regular folk. He can connect with everybody. That's one of the signs of Mashiach. But what is this whole business of he's coming today? It sounds misleading. Why is Mashiach being so deceptive? Why can't he just say, I'm going to come today if, like, I'll come when you guys listen? Like, why is he doing that whole, I'm coming today? Today, if you listen to his voice. Why the whole roundabout answer? And I'd like to share with you 3 different explanations, which I think gives insight into what we can do to bring Mashiach, what we can do to actually make this world a better place. Now, let's take a step back. What is Mashiach? Mashiach is, there's 2 points in Mashiach. There is the technical concept of who Mashiach is as a person. But together with that, there's a larger era and time that it comes with. The function of Mashiach on the most technical level, Mashiach is a king from the dynasty of David. Essentially, King David was like Mashiach, right? He was leading the Jewish people into a peaceful time in the land of Israel. That is the role of Mashiach. Mashiach is a king from the house of David, who's going to lead the Jewish people back to their land, and we're going to be able to serve God properly. That's on the most basic level. With that comes a whole spiritual significance of the world being exposed to the truth of God. And this is what Isaiah describes in his prophecies, that in that time in the Messianic era, the world will be filled with the knowledge of God. And when is this going to happen? Today. And commentaries explain that the word today is a euphemism for knowledge, for clarity. Today as opposed to tonight, because night is a euphemism for darkness, for confusion, for a lack of clarity. And today is a euphemism for knowledge and clarity and connection and understanding. You'd like your relationship to be a today relationship, not a tonight relationship, a relationship that has light, not a relationship that is dark and confusing. So that's why Mashiach says, when you're coming, he says today. And Eliyahu clarifies, today, if you'll listen to his voice, to the voice of God. How do you get the clarity that's today? How do you get the knowledge, the connection? By being better listeners, by listening to the voice of God. Apparently, the word in Hebrew, Shema, which is listen, has another meaning in Hebrew. This doesn't apply in English. You see this, by the way, in the Torah, in the book of Deuteronomy, where the Torah cites the line Shema Yisrael, Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord is one. And commentaries point this out. What does the word Shema mean? Apparently, the word Shema also has a dual meaning. It means to listen or to hear. It also means to gather. When we gather ourselves, when we align ourselves with the day, when we align ourselves with that connection. Here's something interesting. I thought this was fascinating. Starting from Passover, which was like the first Passover was like the sampling of Moshiach, because that was like the first redemption of the Jewish people. And starting from Passover, all the way until the holiday of Shavuos, where there are a gap of 50 days, we count the Omer. Right? Every single night we count, anticipating the giving of the Torah. Again, the giving of the Torah was an incredible revelation at Sinai. That's a sampling of what we're going to experience when Mashiach comes, but we have to count up toward that. We have to anticipate that. We have to work our way toward that. And every night we work on ourselves. We become a little bit better through counting. And what do we say when we count the Omer? We say Hayom, Yom, whatever it is, La Omer. Today is whatever day it may be to the Omer. But when are you supposed to count the Omer? Do you actually count the Omer in the day? You count the Omer at night. In fact, if you're counting in the daytime, you're not even supposed to say a bracha. So we're counting the Omer at night, yet we're using the term today. Because even when we're in the dark, even when it's nighttime, we have to align ourselves with light, anticipate light, gather ourselves, orient ourselves. And when we do that, Moshiach says, I'm going to come. I'm going to come when it's today, when there's light. Going back to this story of Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi asking Moshiach, when are you going to come? There's a parallel story that took place almost 1,500 years later with the Baal Shem Tov. There's a book called Keser Shem Tov, which is a collection of teachings of the Baal Shem Tov. The Baal Shem Tov did not write down his teachings, but these are teachings that people had heard from the Baal Shem Tov and had been written down. And in the introduction of this book, it tells the famous story of the Baal Shem Tov and his visit to Mashiach. The Baal Shem Tov used to travel. He used to travel around all over the world, or all over the region, really, trying to engage souls, because Judaism was becoming very action-oriented, which it is. It's an actionable religion, but people were forgetting about the soul of Judaism. And when you forget about the soul of Judaism, Judaism becomes competitive. Who's doing more mitzvahs? Who knows more Torah? But when it comes to the soul, we're all connected. We're all equal. And the Baal Shem Tov is trying to reiterate that connection. And part of that is our relationship with God. And the Baal Shem Tov was in his trance prayer state, and he'd be visiting different places spiritually while praying. And the Baal Shem Tov he writes this in a letter to his brother, and it's printed in Keser Shem Tov. The Baal Shem Tov says, I would visit in the heavens. I've gone through chamber to chamber, and he describes how he's going through this chamber and through that chamber, and he's meeting this sage from the Talmud and these sages from the Mishnah. He says, I finally arrived at the chamber of the Moshiach. This is what the Baal Shem Tov says. And I said to the Moshiach, he asked the same question Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi asked the Moshiach, when are you coming? And the Moshiach answered me that when you spread your well springs outward, I'm going to come. You take the well springs of the Baal Shem Tov, which is the unconditional value and love of every single Jew and their connection to God. In a nutshell, the true principles of Chassidus, and we share that with the world. Mashiach is going to come. Hayom, if we have that clarity, if we have that light, if we have that passion and love, and we share that with the world, we gather that, we listen, which means to gather, Mashiach is going to come. That's going to bring Mashiach inherently. It's not just that if you do this checklist and you earn enough brownie points, God says, okay, you've earned Mashiach. It's not just a reward, it's a result. The coming of Mashiach, the era of Mashiach, a period in time, as Isaiah describes, that the world will get to know God, is a result, a direct result of us being open to that, of us developing that clarity within ourselves, of us putting on those Mashiach lenses. That's explanation number one. Explanation number two. Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi asks Mashiach, when are you coming? He says, today. Today, if you'll listen to his voice. And what does today mean? The Talmud says, a different section of the Talmud, that today is code word for action. Because the Torah says, Hayom la'asotam, today you should do the mitzvahs, which means doing mitzvahs is associated with today, the here and the now, while you're alive, and reward for mitzvahs is associated with the afterlife. So perhaps when Mashiach tells him, I'm coming today, I'm coming when your focus is on the today, when your focus is on the here and on the now. If you remember, what was Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi's previous question prior to asking when is Mashiach going to come? He said, am I going to go to the world to come? Am I going to be part of the afterlife? His focus was not on the here and the now. His focus was on reward, on what am I going to get later. So what does Mashiach say? Hayom. Focus on the Hayom. Focus on the today. Focus on what you need to do now. You're so worried about if you're going to get to the afterlife. You're so worried about is Mashiach going to come? We're so worried about the reward that's going to come, the result that's going to come from what I'm doing. Focus on the here and on the now. Focus on what's happening right now. This is fundamental to Judaism. I think this is literally what makes Judaism different than any other religion, besides the fact that it's true. And that ain't PC, ain't it? Right? I might get canceled for this one. But theologically or philosophically, one of the biggest differences between Judaism and other religions is the focus on what you need to do versus what you're going to get. Because Christianity tries to bribe you and scare you. If you do this, you'll go to heaven. If you don't do this, you're going to go to hell. You're going to enjoy this. You're going to suffer from this. It's focused on the future. It's future focused. And Judaism is here and now focused. And Moshiach is telling Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, when he asks, when are you going to come? He says, Hayom, today. Focus on the today. Focus on the here and on the now. That's not to say that Judaism doesn't believe in reward and punishment, but that's not the focus of Judaism. Because Judaism sees our service to God like a relationship. A relationship doesn't focus on the future, right? What am I going to get out of this? How is this going to benefit me? Right? That's a good question to ask when you're dating. That's not a good question to ask once you're deep into the relationship, once you're married. You don't ask, how is this going to benefit me? It's a responsibility. It's necessary. It's a necessity, whether it benefits you or not. Respecting and honoring the relationship will benefit you. But focusing on how the relationship will benefit you won't benefit you. And that's why Mashiach tells him, Hayom. Focus on the today. Eliyahu Navi then clarifies, Hayom im bekoy lo tishma'u. Today, if you listen to his voice, to God's voice. If you look at the word bekoy, they translate it. Let's see how they actually translated it. Hold on. Let me open this up here. They translate it literally as you'll listen to his voice. Translations are dangerous. You've heard me say this several times. If you look in the Hebrew, it says im, if, bekoiloi. It doesn't say to his voice. That's not what it says. I mean, that's how it's translated because it needs to make sense in the English language. But if you translate it literally, what does the prefix be mean in Hebrew? In. Listen in his voice. Become sensitive to what God really wants. That's what God tells us to do, which is the mitzvahs. That's listening to his voice. But then there's the reason behind it. There's the meaning behind it. There's the motivation behind it. That's in his voice. Sensitizing ourselves with God's true motivation. What is God's true motivation? The Midrash says that God created the world because he had a deep desire for this world to be a home for him, a place where he could call home, where he's comfortable. Or in the lingo of the Midrash, a dira betachtonim, a home in the lowest of realms. You have this place where God seems most absent and God says, I want to be most present. And the greatest analogy for that is a home, because when you're at home, in contrast to when you're at work, you kick off your shoes and the tie comes off and you're just you. And God says, I want to be comfortable here. And when we honor the will of God by doing mitzvahs, we make him more comfortable. That brings Moshiach. When we focus on the Hayom, what we need to do today, we make God more comfortable. If we want to make people comfortable, focus on what they want, the Hayom, not what you're going to get from them, which is the Machar, that's the tomorrow. Don't focus on how it's going to benefit you. Focus on what they actually want. When we do that, we make God comfortable. That's the Hayom. That's the today. Explanation number 3. Again, Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi asks Moshiach, hey, what's with the delay? When are you coming? He says, Hayom, today. Eliyahu Navi clarifies, today if you listen to his voice. What does this mean? He's coming today. I mean, this was written 1700 years ago, 1800 years ago, or maybe 2000 years ago. So I read recently in a teaching from the Lubavitcher Rebbe, this was in one of his talks, fiery talks in 1990. Starting from 1990, really a little bit before, but this is definitely apparent in the Rebbe's talks, starting from 1990 to 1992. His talks became heavily Mashiach focused, which is fascinating because all the Rebbe's talks are Mashiach focused, but it took a new turn where the Rebbe was really urging the world to really get ready for Mashiach. And in this teaching, the Rebbe says, why did Mashiach tell Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi that he's ready to come Hayom today? Because from Mashiach's perspective, he's literally ready to come today. It's literal. Forget all the euphemistic meanings. He's literally ready to come today. He's ready. He's ready to come to this world. He's ready to make this world a place that God wants it to be. A place that can be filled with the knowledge of God, filled with peace, filled with love, filled with connection, filled with meaning and purpose, filled with transparency. The world by default is the epitome of what's the antonym for transparency? Opaqueness? I don't know. Is that the right word? Lack of transparency. The Hebrew word for world, olam, means to conceal. It comes from the word helam, concealment. The world conceals God. The world hides God. And Mashiach and the whole concept of Mashiach is here to reveal that the world isn't actually hiding God. The world is the deepest expression of God. My clothing aren't hiding me. My clothing are expressing me. My body's not hiding my soul. My body's expressing my soul. The world isn't hiding God. It's expressing God. But there has to be a certain sensitivity and transparency. And when Mashiach comes and the world will become full of the knowledge of God, we're actually going to see this. This is the whole purpose for which God created the world in the first place. And Mashiach says, Hayom, I'm ready today. Then Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi says to Eliyahu Navi, to Elijah, Mashiach lied to me. He's not coming today. And Eliyahu Navi says, well, he's ready to come. It's your fault. Hayom, today, if you listen to his voice, you need to sensitize yourself. You got to, we as Jewish people have to align ourselves. Mashiach is literally ready. He's waiting to come. What we need to do is just sensitize ourselves. In 1992, which was the last public address the Rebbe had given to the Shluchim, so the Chabad emissaries. Every year, Shluchim get together. There's the Kinos HaShluchim, the Chabad Rabbinical Convention, and the Rebbe used to address them. And the Rebbe's last address to them, public address to them in 1992, the Rebbe said in a very fiery teaching in Sicha that the only shlichus that's left, the only job of the Shluchim, is to get the world ready to accept and greet Mashiach. That's it. Right? This piece of Talmud says it all. Mashiach says, I'm ready. I'm here. I want to come to this world. If you guys want the world to be aligned with the vision that I want it to be aligned with, which is what God wants, we're all on the same page. If you're going to just listen to his voice, we're ready. We're ready to roll. And the fascinating thing is, the reason why Mashiach is so ready, I mean, in some ways, it could seem so foreign to the world. The utopia-like description of this messianic era may seem quite foreign. World peace and love and belief and faith and connection being so apparent and so relevant and meaningful and accessible. Do you think we're closer to that or further from that than we've ever been? It may seem like a foreign concept. How is Mashiach ready to come? Like, why are we making it sound so simple? And the reason is because the world had sampled this before. There is a rule, and it's fascinating to me that modern psychology is catching up with this. Modern psychology and psychologists point out that whenever somebody has a problem and they crave normalcy, the reason is because they've sampled that normalcy. You can't crave something you haven't sampled. So if somebody's depressed or anxious and they crave happiness and they come to their therapist and they say, I want to be happy. You know why? Because they've been happy. There was a presence of the desired outcome at some point in their life, which is why they crave that desired outcome. You can't crave happiness if you've never been happy. You can't crave sobriety if you've never been sober. You can't crave a peace. This therapist I was listening to, he gives an example. He says when he meets couples, instead of asking them what brings them here, which is essentially saying, tell me about the lowest point in your life. Tell me about the worst part of your marriage. He says, how did you meet? Right? Let's go in the past and look at the best parts that you've already sampled, and let's try to rebuild that. So the truth is, the world has sampled already this messianic era. First of all, from day one of creation, the world was created in this perfect utopian-like spiritual zone. I mean, God was having open conversations with Adam and Eve. Adam and Eve were totally naked because they weren't aware of the concept of lust and negativity and selfishness and self-awareness in a negative way. It wasn't until they sinned that all that changed. But the world was essentially in this messianic-like state. That's why the Midrash says that the Shekhinah, the divine presence, was literally here. Okay, Adam and Eve and their sin and subsequent sins had driven that away. But the world had sampled it already. The world later sampled it 10 generations later, this week's Torah portion, in the ark. What took place on this ark? You have Noach, you have animals, you have a wolf and a lamb dwelling together in the same ark. Isn't that the prophecy of Isaiah, the world peace that Mashiach is going to come? The viper and the baby dwelling together. There was this utopian, this spiritual utopian, this revelation of God in that ark. The world was amidst the destruction, amidst the rebooting of creation because of all the immorality. There was some sort of sampling of sobriety to this world. The world has tasted it. And because the world has tasted it, the world can actually expect it. And the only thing we need to do is Hayom. Let's be ready today because Mashiach is ready today. Okay, that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.